Welcome to Unscripted Believe at Noon, the podcast on Noon Miracle, where we sit down for real conversations that reveal the miracle in all of us. I'm your host, Amy Goldberg, joined by my co-host and the creator of Noon Miracle, Jane Sibbett. And today we're very excited to welcome our guest, Marianne Williamson. Each episode we get to know someone new, not just by what they do, but who they are, by simply talking and listening. It's all about connection, curiosity, and discovering the magic that lives in all of us. So let's dive in. This is Believe at Noon.
Glad to be here, and it's lovely to meet you both.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm actually going to just start with, if you look back on yourself, I would say 10 years ago, what's something that you never would have predicted about your life right now?
A lot of what has happened in my life, if I had thought about it, I don't think anything's been deeply unpredictable. The stuff that was unpredictable happened much earlier. The very fact that, Oprah Winfrey liked my book and gave me this sort of international, I would never have predicted that. I would never have predicted my career as an author. I would never have, so much happened. But in terms of the last 10 years, I think what has happened in the world, I would never have predicted. But in terms of my own life, I think by 10 years ago, nothing so extraordinarily different has occurred.
I had to pick this up today. I mean, it's out of my bookshelf. And
what is it, Jane?
This is Marianne's Healing. Oh, gosh, The Healing of America. There it is. You're a prophet. You're a prophet. You predicted this on the back of this book. She says within the next 10 years, America will experience a renaissance or catastrophe. Something is going to happen to take us back to who we are. She called it, and this was 20.
That was in 1998, Jane. You're absolutely right. And you're right. Because if you look at the world from any kind of a holistic or whole person perspective, you could see this coming. Yeah. And this is why I ran for office.
Yeah.
I began, in my career, when the AIDS crisis burst onto the scene in LA and stuff, because of that, within that, and because of that with other people as well, I've been very up close and personal with people in some of the darkest hours of their lives.
Yeah.
But back in the 1980s, when you met somebody who was dealing with cancer or dealing with AIDS or dealing with bankruptcy or dealing with any of the awful things that sometimes happen in people's lives, America was still a place where for the majority of people, you got a sense that the crisis was the exception and not the rule. But what I saw traveling this country by the time that book came out in 1998 was that things had shifted in such a way that I met too many people for whom the crisis was the rule and not the exception. It wasn't just that they had cancer, it's that they didn't have health care.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that they didn't have a job or went bankrupt, it's that one job couldn't support a family of four. So I recognize the ubiquity of a level of grasping for survival among people that could only lead to catastrophe. And I recognize that the political system doesn't look under the surface.
Yeah.
So, yes, and I think that book, Healing the Soul of America, I like that part that you've got there on the back when it talks about money, and it was all there. It was all there. But the traditional political lens didn't see it, didn't recognize the danger. And on the left side of the spectrum, among the Democrats, had the audacity to say that anybody who didn't see it the way they saw it was unqualified. Whereas anybody who saw it the way I saw it, I considered them unqualified because they didn't have a clue what was going on.
Right. You have changed the landscape so much, and still here we are in this catastrophic. Okay, let me just back up just for a moment. Amy, I just need to let you know that when the first time I saw Marianne speak, I was going to Agape, and I go there and there is a line around the block and into the parking lot of people there to see Marianne. And I had no idea at that time who you were. And she absolutely rocked my world, because here is a woman. Oh, it just makes me cry to think of it. speaking from her heart with eloquence and passion and full of the fire that we need to make the change that all of us, whether we're mothers or not, to make the change for the next generations. And it is such a profound honor to have you here again.
Oh, thank you. That's so generous and kind of you to say. Thank you.
And I don't want to waste a moment of your time here. I want to dive right into how do we take the miraculous, all that you know about the miraculous, all of your work. What can we do now?
Well, we need a miracle now.
Yeah, we do.
Because there were so many problems that should have been dealt with before that were not dealt with while they were manageable. Yeah. And they were dismissed or at least minimized by the very institutional entities that should have been the keeper of their care. And far too many Americans just farmed out their own critical thinking to people who didn't have any more of a clue than that. Now we do need a miracle, but that's okay too. During the American Revolution, the British were fighting a 17th century war in the 18th century. They sent a bunch of soldiers in redcoats over to the colonies, and they stood in a long line, and they waited for someone to yell, "Fire!" The American colonists had been around Native Americans, and they at that point were, although the term wouldn't have been used at that time, guerrilla fighters. They just from behind trees. This is also how the Viet Cong beat the U.S. Army in Vietnam. And they beat in both cases, the most powerful army in the world, defeated by people jumping up from behind trees. And there were always more of them. So we have to see this now as not something where you can look necessarily to a political party, not something where you can look necessarily to so many of the institutional guarantees of what we were brought up to believe were our guarantees of our freedom and our liberty have been so attacked, so undermined that they're literally crumbling in front of our eyes. But that doesn't mean that there's nothing happening. You and I were talking about Gavin Newsom before. So the thing I like about Gavin Newsom, first of all, the people who are senators and congressmen and women have very limited power right now in the Democratic Party, obviously, because Republicans control both houses. So the governors right now are extremely important. So you have people like Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, Kathy Hochul in New York. You have judges, federal judges, some of whom are Republicans, by the way, behaving very courageously right now. You see individuals who show up at these ICE protests, trying to warn people, trying to protect people. There is a lot of heroism going on right now. And I think that's how we have to see ourselves, each and every one of us. Do something today. Do what you can. Think of that guerrilla model, right? It's political warfare. Someone is making war on the constitutional system of the United States. It is a political war. We've already reached authoritarianism. Now once you start controlling the content of universities, museums, law firms, media companies, once you get the Congress to surrender its power to you, get the Supreme Court to do the same, we have already completed. Step one is authoritarianism. Step two is totalitarianism. Now, totalitarianism is particularly scary because that's when you bring in the military, which he's already started to do. He's got them in Washington, D.C. It started, of course, with things in Los Angeles. Now he's in D.C. He's saying he's only just begun. He's talking about New York. He's talking about Chicago and so forth. And the only phase after that is fascism, in which basically they have control of everything. So at this point, the miracle begins with a quality of personhood within ourselves. The Course in Miracles says miracles are born of conviction. And that's what is needed now. We were talking before this call about being mothers, being grandmothers. When anybody's had a teenager, usually it has something to do with sex, drugs, alcohol. There's this fierceness that comes up in you when you sense that there could be a danger in this house. And it simply will not happen in this house. You won't have it. We have to become that way, each and every one of us, whether it's a podcast, whether it's something with your social media, whether it's running for office. But I think that the shift in our own thinking has to do with knowing this can't be a part-time job. If we're going to save our democracy now, we have to, each and every one of us, ask, how can I help? Gandhi, when he was asked who is the leader of the Indian independence movement, said, the small, still voice within.
Yeah. And that's so true. And Marianne, I want to ask you, I'm just going to take a little bit of a turn. Your quote, our deepest fear is, our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It's taken on a whole life of its own. If you could rewrite that or expand upon that for the world today, what would that be? Would you add something to that?
That's, that book, the subtitle of that book, that's from my book, A Return to Love. And the subtitle is Reflections on the Principles of the Course in Miracles. That's simply a reflection on the principles of the Course, that the ego mind wants you to think that you're tiny and limited and powerless. And that is, it's a perverse comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it's also, especially as women, I think, you're given approval for that. You're a good girl.
Yep.
And what the world is more likely to have a problem with is if you say, wait a minute, I have as much, the Course in Miracles says that the people who have achieved the most on this earth have achieved a fraction of what each and every one of us is capable of. And also one of the reasons the ego mind, from a Course in Miracles perspective, doesn't want you to think of yourself as carrying within you the unlimited power of God is because in the moment you realize that, you have no need of an ego, you have no need of a limited sense of self. So no, I wouldn't change it.
Going back into that, bringing to this spirit into the politics now, into that small voice, guerrilla tactics to bring us back into how to make that change. Obviously, we want to do it in a nonviolent way. But what do you suggest?
Well, you have a podcast.
Yes.
Almost everybody has a social media platform. It takes courage right now. It takes courage. Too many people who are afraid you're going to lose clicks. You're going to lose clients. You're going to, I think for women particularly, we're going to luse approval. This is the kind of, people won't like me. People will say I'm overreacting. It could be whatever in your life. Some people might say, well, I could put that article that I read, I know on my Instagram, I have on my stories, so much content. There's great content out there. Well, but if I do that, only 10 people would see it. Well, that's 10 people.
Exactly.
Right. Who's
That's 10 people.
Right.
And you don't know, I always felt that in my career. You could be talking to 1,000 people, you could be talking to 20 people, but you don't know who's in that audience.
Absolutely.
And sometimes smaller groups is where you can go deeper. Just be in the conversation. Don't expect to be liked for it. Don't expect to be approved. Know that there's somebody out there. Something that has always guided me in my career. There was an author named Arnold Patton, and he said, if you genuinely have something to say, there's someone out there who genuinely needs to hear it.
Good point. Marianne, were you always like this as a kid, even as a child?
I once read somewhere, it was an article about myself, and it said, Marianne Williamson doesn't say anything everybody else isn't saying. She's just saying it when the lights are on and the microphone is on. I don't think I just said anything that everybody's not saying late at night. So when you say, were you this way? Yeah, I'm a Jew from Texas. So I have a personality of a Jewish broad from a state where women are big and have big hair. It looks like you have big hair even when your hair is big. I have that personality, and my father was a left wing. He took us to Vietnam to show us what war was. But I think most importantly is just that I have this, I don't know. I think I'm saying what everybody I know is saying, but people are like afraid to say it.
Yeah, they are.
I don't think it's that I'm saying anything different. Everybody's looking, I used to say, people are looking and saying, this is crazy. Don't you think this is crazy? Well, I went out there and said, this is crazy.
Right.
Neoliberalism is no match for fascism.
Right.
This is going to fall apart. There are too many suffering people. That becomes a petri dish out of which, ideological capture is bound to occur. Anybody who's read 7th grade level history of Germany, of the French Revolution, this is basic stuff. If you have any knowledge of history, can somebody just come out and say this?
Yeah.
And I was punished harshly, I think, for doing so.
No, you
Pardon?
You were punished harshly for saying so.
Well, I think that the reaction of many established forces against my running for president. Absolutely.
Well, I'm so proud of your voice out there and take great inspiration to this day. I know that playing the character that I have on Friends, I am constantly doing, going to, I wouldn't even say battle, just like thump away on your Bible right now. Right now, the only thing that matters is love. The only thing that matters is love, but also the ferocity of a mother throwing a car off of her child.
And I think that's true too. I think a lot of people have this idea that spirituality is always so nice. I don't think it's negative to yell fire if the house is burning down.
Yeah.
That's what I keep saying to my friends. Look, I've been seeing this the last time that he was in office. Like, if you see your child running after a ball into the middle of the street and there's a semi bearing down, you're not going to say, "Oh, it's going to be okay. I trust it's going to be like." God, for God's sakes.
Another half-baked spiritual principle is the idea that what you focus on expands.
Right.
Well, say that to an oncologist. And that's the heartbreak that I feel. You mentioned my book, Healing of America, that came out in 1998. None of this had to happen.
Exactly.
None of this had to happen. So we are where we are, but the Course in Miracles says there is no order of difficulty in miracles. I think far more people love than hate. We just need to literally encourage one another.
Yeah.
Right.
Literally encourage one another. This is not the time to be silent. It's not a time to underestimate the power of any single individual. Like I said, if you have a social media platform, if you have an Instagram page, people who have podcasts, people, flood the field. If they're telling lies, you tell truth. If they're spreading hate, you spread love.
Yeah. It's true. And Marianne, I always find it fascinating because, look, I mean, you came from and we talked about spirituality in the context of what you're talking about, but you've stood in the intersection of spirituality and politics, they're very different.
Needed.
So what's
Right.
one thing,
Yeah.
which I think is interesting, what's one thing people misunderstand about you when you walk into either of those rooms?
Well, unfortunately, many of the so-called spiritual crowd was like, I like her, but I just can't stand that she talks about politics. And a lot of the political crowd where I like her, but I just can't stand that she talks about spirituality. But this separation between the two is the aberration. When I was in college, we read Ram Dass and Alan Watts in the morning, and we went to Vietnam anti-war protests in the afternoon. Back in the 60s and the 70s, there wasn't this idea, stay in your lane.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It didn't even exist. And it's an un-American concept. Everybody is a citizen. Everybody has a right to speak. This idea that there's a political class and they have a right to speak, this is new and it's part of how we got here.
Exactly.
So when I wrote that book, Healing of America, I did a deep dive and a study into American history in a way that I had not before. And what I wanted to learn about was spirituality and politics. That's when I learned, really, in a level I had not realized, the nonviolent political philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. I learned that Martin Luther King had gone to India and studied that and brought it back to the United States for application to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. What Gandhi said was that there is an inner light within every man, woman, and child, and it heals, which he got a lot from the Quakers, by the way, and that it heals not only our personal relationships, but our economic and our social relationships as well. Another thing that a lot of Americans don't seem to realize is that when you look at the great social justice movements in the history of the United States, how many of them were grounded in and initiated by religious spiritual circles. Among white Americans, the abolitionist movement emerged from the early evangelical churches in New Hampshire. Among the Quakers, many of those women were religious. Among the suffragists, the women suffragists, many of them, the seminal thinkers, were religious Quakers. And it came from the idea an inner light makes us equal, so why can't women vote? And then, of course, Dr. King was a Baptist preacher. I'm not bringing in some woo-woo new thing. What I was talking about was actually a profound lineage of American history. Even when I was growing up, now Dr. King would say things like, Reverend King would say things like, it's time to inject a new dimension of love into the veins of human civilization. Now, if I say that, it's woo-woo.
Yeah,
But be very
absolutely.
clear. Those who said that it was woo-woo didn't say that because they thought it was woo-woo. They never read any of my books. They said it because I was talking about universal health care. They said it because I was talking about tuition-free college and tech school. I said it because I was talking about income inequality, and I was talking about wealth tax. I was talking about the state of America's children. I was talking about a Department of Peace, and they thought, oh, we better convince people not to listen to her. So they came up with this woo-woo to make people think, oh, smart people wouldn't
Right.
listen to her. But
Right.
be clear, that's why they did it.
Yes, it's true. It's true. And your work with atonement. Well, I know that this Department of Peace that you, I mean, tell us more about the Department of Peace and how can we now bring this forward?
Now,
Now we
once
need it
again,
more
so
than
many
ever.
of these things didn't have to,
Right.
it didn't have to happen. Okay, so there are 4 statistics. First of all, there are, most people don't seem to, I don't know about most, but many, many people in the United States don't seem to realize peace building is a thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are 4 statistics. When these 4 things are present in any situation, whether it's another corner of the world or a corner of an American city, if these things are present, statistically, the incidence of peace will be higher and an incidence of violence will be lower. Greater economic opportunities for women, greater educational opportunities for children, a diminishment of violence against women, and the amelioration of unnecessary human despair.
Right.
Those are the causal levels of crime. Those are the causal levels of violence, of conflict. Now, if you there was an interesting book that came out years ago by Ronan Farrow called The War on Peace.
Yes.
And there's an image in that book that always stayed with me. And first of all, a lot of people say, well, Department of Peace, isn't that what our State Department is supposed to be? First of all, a Department of Peace would be not only international, but also domestic. But also, the State Department gets a fraction of the money that the military gets. Okay. So one of the images that he used, Ronan Farrow used in that always stayed with me. Let's say you're in a conference room, right? And there are people sitting around the conference room, and the president is sitting around with his or her main advisors. He said if it were 40 years ago, it would have been the State Department and the diplomats around the table. And then it would have been the military guys sitting around the walls, the side behind them. Today, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It would be the military people. And also, he said 40 years ago, if somebody said, well, we better not do that because the State Department might not like it. Today, somebody's saying that, they go, ooh, that's too bad, scary.
Right.
Now, what would Department of Peace, not only if it was created, but if it actually was empowered, what would have happened? The Department of Peace would have been saying to a president who theoretically, if we were a more evolved nation, would have understood this 30 years ago. Well, Obama understood it, but he wouldn't act on it. That this has to do with going back. Would have said, you know, Mr. President or Madam President, those settlements on the West Bank, they're illegal.
Right.
You know, this stuff's going to blow. You know, this is not legal. You know, you got that siege of Gaza. It's too much. If you have, anytime you have large groups of desperate people, that becomes a petri dish out of which all manner of societal and personal dysfunction becomes absolutely inevitable. That includes ideological capture by genuinely psychotic forces. And it also includes attraction to a political strongman, such as we have now. So these are the kinds of things which, if anyone with a systems analysis would have known. When it comes to Israel and Palestine, I think it is important to remember Carter tried and Clinton tried. And it is important because at that time, the United States did have an official posture of seeking to be a quote unquote honest broker. Once George Bush came in, George W. Bush, he brought in, you know, the neocons. Whoever is an enemy of Israel is an enemy of ours. But when Obama came in, like so many things, this is what happened over the last few decades. The Republicans started it, but no Democrat would stop it. So instead of, after Bush, Obama coming in and saying, no, we're going to say it like it is, as with so many things, he knew, he made it clear he knew, but he wouldn't spend political capital on it. And so Israel, whether it's Israel and Palestine, there are so many things where these things just accumulated, just accumulated, just accumulated. And the kinds of voices and the kind of filters that could have been brought to bear for a much deeper conversation, what a psychologist knows, what a teacher knows, what a clergy person knows, this that's considered unqualified is exactly the conversations we should have been having.
Right. We need
And
to.
it's important going forward because I believe we will get past this horrifying chapter. I believe that with all my heart, because I think that there is something in the American spirit that
He's
at the
rising.
deepest level, but we are going to have to create some serious changes on the other side of this, or we will just be back here again. And I don't know if the country could endure it twice.
The workshops that you have coming up, are they addressing some of this? What can you tell us about these?
Well, it's interesting because my classes, like if people go to Marianne.com, that's my classes, Course in Miracles, The Magnificent Crone, and there's very little political conversation unless someone brings it up. And it's interesting. And on my Substack, I do both. On my Substack, I write political articles as well as do something called Metaphysical Minute. But it's interesting. When I have been out there, we are now at a time. See, when I was talking about college, when I was in college, and, it was change was everywhere. It was sexual change, musical change, political change, spiritual change, right? It was one big counterculture. People hadn't divided into lanes. After, I think, the assassinations of the Kennedys and King, I think that's what changed this. And then there were these people who took the traditional political, and there were people who took the traditional spiritual, and they were both like mutually derisive. Well, I never got the memo that you had to choose. It's different now. One of the reasons I ran for president this time,
I was going to ask you.
I was in Austin, Texas at the South by Southwest thing. And somebody said, "Oh, you're here. Why don't we have you talk?" They said, "Let's just ask a coffee house somewhere in Austin. They have a big patio. And why don't we just put it in the paper or whatever that you're here?" Okay. And it was big, 200-300 people, a lot of people were there. And somebody said, it was just said Marianne Williamson. And so it was interesting to see what was happening. The sort of personal growth spiritual crowd, because a lot of people knew each other, were on one side. And the more progressive left-wing political people were on the other side.
Oh, interesting.
And I didn't know how that was going to work. And something very interesting happened that night. When somebody, and also this has to do with younger people. Younger people, if I talk in a college now, they talk about depression in one question, and the next question is drone warfare. They're not even 20th century people. They have a far more holistic, whole person perspective, which is a good thing. But what I noticed that night was that somebody would come up and ask a question that was totally personal, spiritual, personal relationships, blah, blah, blah. But I noticed something. And that's that the people on the political side were leaning in and listening for the answer. They weren't like, "Oh, she talks about that shit." It wasn't like that. They were leaning because they have lives and romances and everything they're going through too. Then when political questions were asked, I noticed that the personal growth people were leaning in almost from this place of, I think I need to start learning this stuff. And I saw that a merger was possible. I was not successful at creating that within a political context, which I had hoped to do. But there are so many institutional forces seeking to obstruct anything that we would see as an evolutionary movement forward. But now, when you say at your workshops, when you talk, whether it's in LA, whether it's in Toronto, wherever, it's a spiritual context of the evolution of the human race, right? And where we are as humanity. But every aspect, Gandhi said politics should be sacred. And by that, he didn't mean religious or dogmatic, but he meant that when we talk about political issues, it should come from the same kind of place that we talk from in therapy or with a lover or Just whatever, we have to go deeper, and it should be heartfelt. So I think people now, how can you not talk about what's going on?
Mhm.
I mean, come on. So
Yeah, great.
I find people, there's a spiritual filter, there's a spiritual context, but within that, an openness. People are smart. That's one of the things I've always had a problem with traditional politics. They talk to people like they're dumb.
Yeah.
And my father was a lawyer, and he always said, talk to the smartest person on the jury. And I always saw that in my work. Just talk to people like they're smart, and people just rise to the occasion. Anybody with a rudimentary knowledge of history would have predicted this. Our generation is so arrogant.
Mhm.
Like, oh, we've grown past that stuff. When really, if you have a sense of holism, and you have there are these cycles of history. I mean, this is what we're experiencing right now. This is the fall of Rome.
It is.
But we are living that archetype. It is happening now. But the barbarians got to the gate. The barbarians crashed through the gate. But the barbarians couldn't have gotten in, and they couldn't have sacked the city had there not already been this collapse of the things that mattered most. So the barbarians have made it in, and we have to, each and every one of us. And I think we will.
Call it out.
I think we are.
We have to. Yeah.
I think we are. But like I said, we have to encourage one another. Friends don't let friends get distracted.
That's right. I think a lot of people were just praying that someone else would save us, or that somebody within our party would save us, or
Well, even
got
that,
lazy,
like
right?
you were talking about Gavin Newsom, and I like Gavin Newsom right now. Not, policies aside, he's always been, a little too neoliberal for me, but his energy, and he's out there every day. I really admire him. But we cannot, you are absolutely not with the program someone who thinks that we can think, well, if we only have the right person for 2028. Because if we're not careful, we won't even have it 2026.
Correct.
So there has to be a solid wall energetically.
Yep.
We're in this position in large part because we farmed out our best thinking and thought they would do it. The party would do it. By the way, parties are part of how we got into this mess.
Truth.
George Washington warned us about them. John Adams said they were the biggest threat. So yeah, 28 is going to be important. 26 is important. But every morning when we wake up, it's important. Have I talked to someone? Have I looked online? Have I seen what's happening in my city? Have I seen what's happening in my community? There's something each and every one of us can do.
We need to add that into our action items for sure. I know you had said something about just take an hour a day. An hour a day. Some of us are trying to figure out how we can read the news, be informed, but even an hour a day to work it out, because it's important.
It's so true. And Marianne, I want to, first of all, we want to thank you for your time. And I want to finish with this, if I may. If you could put just one sentence or a series of sentences on every billboard in America, what would it say?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a different answer than it might have been at another time.
Yeah.
Pray for a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for being on Noon Miracle.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you are a miracle also.
Yes, absolutely.
Truly.
It's
And we
so
know-
lovely meeting both of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we know you have an upcoming tour. You're going to be in Houston, Texas on September 26th. We'll make a note of this. In Toronto on October 4th, and Los Angeles on October 25th. That's fabulous.
Yeah.
So grateful to you. Thank
It's
you.
lovely meeting both of you, and good luck to you. And American women are going to be a large part of what pulls us off. So wonderful, wonderful meeting you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.